Feel free, and you can start that way. We'll, we'll go with Mr. Epstein first.
What they think is a business, what the state is a real. If you guys know about the
Can I answer first? Can I respond to that? Yeah, okay. First of all, I think without the mic. Oh, first of all, I just said you might have been speaking to somebody else when I said this, but the discussion about a two-state solution right now is probably the primary barrier to achieving real peace. A two-state solution hasn't worked. It can't work. It won't work, and I think it shouldn't work. I think it was a solution that did not take into consideration the identities, the grievances, the aspirations of the people on the ground. And Palestinian society is way past it. It's time we get past it as well.
So personally, I believe that right now the state of the Palestinian people and their government is not in the right state for them to have their own country and their own state, because Hamas is in charge of the government that has taken over, unfortunately. Maybe sometime in the future, if they can work, they can lead to a state. What those boundaries would be, whether it would be in the West Bank, only in Gaza, how much land they would get, and whether it would be from us or from wherever their country would be, that's a different issue. But right now, their current state of the government is cannot sustain a country.
Right. So similar to Mars, listen, two-state solution would be nice. It's been offered. There's been offers made. They've been rejected. Nowadays, with both sides of the government, Israeli side too, a two-state solution I do not see happening anytime soon. And I agree with what you said about we need a different solution to the Middle East conflict, because a two-state solution isn't feasible and it's not going to come into fruition. They've attempted it. It's just not going to happen, because both sides will not agree on what they're actually going to swap and everything else in Jerusalem as international capital. I doubt that's going to happen anytime soon.
So yeah, going along with what they said, I completely agree. And also I think that Gaza somewhat served as a prototype for a two-state solution. And we can see that they have a weak or no government, and that Israel simply just can't communicate with them. So I believe that if there was a two-state solution, you would have to have different leadership, because with that leadership, we can't possibly have two-state solution.
I think we also have not only talked about the failures of the two-state solution, but the failures of the situation in Gaza for both peoples. And I don't think we're going to have peace on our southern front until we acknowledge we made a huge mistake in 2005. Go back, rebuild Gush Katif, take control, and offer the Palestinians there a better life together with us. I think it's problematic that Israel lets any country decide where they want to have their embassy in our country. If it were up to me, I would probably say, if you want to have a relationship with us, this is where your embassy goes. If not, goodbye. But we're not saying that. The way I would flip it at this point is probably, an embassy is a form of mini sovereignty. Like that's how an embassy works in most countries, and that's diplomacy. So I would say that at this point, because nobody wants to have an embassy in Jerusalem anyway, the best thing our government can say is, because we insist that Jerusalem remain under exclusively Jewish sovereignty, we will not allow any embassies to exist, any form of mini foreign sovereignty in our capital. And then you'll see some of them will come running to try and build embassies in Jerusalem.
So yes, I do think that Donald Trump should move the embassy to Jerusalem, because ultimately, no matter what people do say, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, is one united capital of Israel, and we have already, Eastern Jerusalem is the only part of the West Bank that we have officially annexed immediately after the 6-Day War, and it is part of our country, it is our capital. No matter what other people want to recognize or not, at the end of the day, Jerusalem as one is our capital, and the embassy should be there.
They already used my answers. Listen, for the most part, who needs America to decide where their embassy is going to be to tell me that Jerusalem is the capital? We pray facing Jerusalem. I have Jerusalem written on so many things. Obama, Trump, whoever the next president is going to be, president after that, Keep your embassy where you want. I know where my capital is. I don't need them to tell me. And at the same time, if you really want to, a lot of people say that it shouldn't be moved there because the future Palestinian state might have East Jerusalem as the capital. So what's the problem with moving the embassy to West Jerusalem and putting West Jerusalem as whatever where the embassy would be? But regardless, if they move it, nice. If they don't, it's still our capital.
So it's really hard to speak last because they already said everything I want to say. But basically, I think it should be. Oh, okay. So basically, I think it should be Israel's decision.
How do you feel that the relationship between Netanyahu affected peace talks over the next week?
So, in the beginning of the U.S. election, Netanyahu showed support both towards Trump and Clinton, and I believe it was important for him to show support to both parties, as one of them was going to be our next president. I think that Trump and Netanyahu have a very healthy relationship. I think they communicate well, and I think that Trump kind of puts the onus on Netanyahu to know what to do with the Palestinians. He has opinions, but he changes them, and he's very lenient with them. And I think that Netanyahu knows exactly what he wants to do, and that Trump will let him do that, and hopefully that'll make peace in the future.
All right. In a nutshell, peace talks are not going to do anything for us. It hasn't done anything for us. If you're going to have peace and you're going to sit down, the other side has to be willing to first have peace and acknowledge your existence. If you're going to have peace talks, let's say, for example, and then honor a suicide bomber the very next day and name a park after them, your peace talks are worthless. And at the same time, if Israel's government, the coalition it has right now, isn't really committed to peace, the peace talks are useless. So I think Trump, first of all, Trump came out with a statement today. I'm pretty sure that they're not going to force both sides to come to the peace talks because they believe the same thing, that if it's not going to go anywhere, then we're not going to force something on them. So I agree with that. I think that he'll be for peace talks if both sides come to the table and are willing to come there without the release of terrorists, for example, that Israel always does before peace talks. So if they could actually come to peace talks and it does something, do it. But I don't think it's going to change much because there is no urge for peace talks on either side.
So I think we still have a lot to see, and we're yet to wait to see what relationship will build between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. If you were to ask me this question in a couple of hours, I would probably have a better answer because they're meeting right now in the White House. But one thing that I do think will happen over the next 4 years is that, like we said before, President Trump is recognizing Israel as a sovereign country more than a pawn of the U.S. I feel like back with the past presidents, they saw Israel more, the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict, more as pawns in a chess game. They just were moving them around, trying to work with both of them, but more of, we're going to tell you what to do, and if you don't do that, you're going to look bad in front of the world. Whereas President Trump is more on the side of, I'm going to let you handle your problems. Of course, they're going to be involved to try to help as much as possible, but at the end of the day, we see that you're a sovereign country and you have the right to make decisions for yourself.
I'm not interested in a good emperor or a bad emperor. I want freedom. I want whoever's in the White House to be relevant to what policies Israel pursues. That being said, I also think we have to acknowledge and criticize the fact that within the framework that currently exists for peace between us and the Palestinians, the broader Middle East, the party, the government that we've been trusting or we're supposed to trust to lead us towards peace has also been the party benefiting the most from the conflict. At the end of the day, Israel, the Palestinians, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Hamas through Qatar, all essentially get their weapons from the same place. So we have to recognize that peace is not in the economic interests of the United States, and we should stop allowing the United States to force solutions on us that always end up failing. That being said, I do believe that peace can happen if we change the paradigm. And, I was on tour until last night. I was on tour with a Palestinian from Bethlehem. We spoke in Philadelphia, Toronto, Boston, New York. And he's a colleague of mine. And one of the things he said, I think is very important. He said, when we talk about peace up till now, think of a picture. We always talk about the frame. When we talk about the political solutions and structures, we speak about the frame of the picture. But we're not talking about the actual canvas. We need to focus now on the canvas. That means that if we're interested in peace, those on the ground need to be able to get together and create and paint what kind of society can we both be satisfied with together. And once we figure out what peace looks like in a way that I feel like I've won, and for me, victory is the correction of everything the Romans have done to us, the realization of the things we say in the Shemona Esrei 3 times a day. That's what victory looks like for me. And also the Palestinians can feel like they've won. And once we figure out what that painting looks like, we can come up with a good frame to fit it.
Reflecting back on that, where the embassy is located, why does that even matter where it's located? The fact that we have an embassy there is even lucky to begin with.
What was the question?
Why does it matter where in Israel should the embassy be located?
It's an issue of respect, which is important.
So Israel should move their U.S. embassy to California and then tell the United States, you know what? We're going to leave our embassy in California because we think California is where the embassy should be. The U.S. would be like, what are you talking about? D.C. is our capital. It should be in D.C. Think. Like I said, it's respect for the country itself.
Hi, I'm just curious how you would view this new land grab law that was recently instated, so to speak. What do you think what's this controversy about it, and how do you think we should go about it from this point forward?
I can see a Mona from my house. I think it's a band-aid solution. I think we should really acknowledge that property rights has been politicized. Like land ownership has been politicized the same way demography has been politicized and archaeology has been politicized and identities have been politicized in our conflict. And I would say, as a Jew living in the West Bank, I would say that the ideological common denominator of Jews living in Samaria and Judah, because we're not homogenous. A Jew in Hebron is not the same as a Jew in Ariel, and a Jew in Beit El is not the same as a Jew in Ma'ale Adumim. We're diverse. But the one ideological position I think we all share is the following. We are a proud ancient nation from the land of Israel. We were unjustly displaced against our will. We somehow managed to come home after 2,000 years against all odds, and now the international community seems determined to displace us again. And the only way we know how to resist so far is to try and populate as much of the West Bank as possible to make moving as difficult. That's basically the common ideological denominator among Jews living in Judea and Samaria. And as a result, the Palestinians are actually very peripheral to that story. But we don't always take into consideration who might own what. Back when Menachem Begin or Yitzhak Shamir were running our country, there were plenty of legal places that didn't belong to anybody that we can go and build Jewish communities. But because there's been a housing freeze, because the Netanyahu government stopped Jewish building in the territories, many of us have gone and taken things into our own hands and populated any empty mountain that we saw possible in order to achieve this goal. My problem is that when this happens, like Amona, what happened in Amona a couple of weeks ago, and we speak about it, I've been here almost since a couple of days after it took place, people are not even sensitive to the fact that 200 children were thrown out of their homes. Everybody has like an excuse. Well, they shouldn't have been there. Like, we don't have a right to have a struggle. Like, our struggle isn't real. And the law was really a band-aid solution meant to prevent house demolitions from continuing, but it's not a solution. I feel that we have an obligation. I don't even believe necessarily in a right to the land. I believe we have an obligation to the land. We have a responsibility to the land. I, as a Jew, have a responsibility to make sure there is justice in the entire land of Israel. That means there should not be house demolitions, not for Jews, not for Palestinians. It means after 50 years of Jewish rule in Judea and Samaria, there should not be refugee camps. And we should start thinking about our aspirations, what we want, and how to create the conditions for those things to be achieved instead of playing defense and playing ridiculous political games.
Okay, so I don't know enough about the technicalities of the law to go into that, but something I can definitely tell you is that unless a Palestinian is living in the West Bank illegally, if they're giving consent to leave their homes, and we're not doing anything that's inhumane, like taking someone out of their home where they've been for their whole lives, with legal backgrounds, just coming in and kicking them out for with no good background to it, then the land is ours. Oh, so if you're talking about more about, like, let's say Amona, I think they waited too long. The Israeli government waited too long to kick them out of their homes. There was already established families. You had, like was said, you have children that grew up there. That's where they were raised. That's where they were lived, and now they're being just thrown out and saying, "Hey, we're gonna place you where we decide because you're not supposed to be here." So no, I don't think that's right. If the Israeli government should have done it 20 years ago when they first established and they had one family that said we're going to set up a community there, a settlement, then it wasn't illegal. I know. That's what I'm getting to. So when they got there, they settled illegally. That's a whole different story. But right now, the Israeli government waited too long to kick them out. They should have just made them.
Next question, please.
Regarding Bibi Netanyahu's tweet to Trump supporting the wall between America and Mexico, Mexico got mad, and then the president of Israel, Reuven, he said sorry on behalf of Israel. Do you agree with him going against the Prime Minister, what he said, saying sorry for his statement? Yeah, this week.
So concerning other governments like having opinions on how the U.S. or how Israel does its politics, I don't think that. I think that every political figurehead should be able to have their opinion about what the other country is doing, but I don't know if it's right to directly express it, especially when it's very controversial. I don't think it was right just because it could cause people to turn against Israel just because of American politics, which should not even be involved in Israel. So I don't think that any of the tweets should have happened, honestly.
So we have this saying in college activism, in Israel activism, leave the Hasbara to the college students or the people involved in advocacy. Which, let me explain, Hasbara means advocacy. All right, so that's what we do on college campuses. Netanyahu should, and Trump also, they should stay away from Twitter for a little and stop tweeting every little thing, because I don't even use Twitter. So personally, my opinion is that whether he was right and wrong or wrong in doing it, politicians need to understand that they're politicians at the end of the day, and whatever they say is going to get blown out of proportion regardless. Second of all, it damaged us on campuses because he wrote specifically the word wall, and we've been trying to get it away from wall for so long. Like, I tell them, hey, did you know it's actually 93% fence, and it's not really whatever amount of wall. And then and he's just damaging more because people already have this mindset, apartheid wall. So someone who doesn't know and read that tweet, they're like, oh, so Israel does have a wall, and it does help them, protect them from who? So aside from the apology, I think he should have just not necessarily tweeted it. His personal belief is whatever, but he is representing a country, and it was, I don't think he should have done that.
Okay, so I completely agree with Tomer especially about when he ruined it for the college advocates about the whole wall and fence situation. But I don't think it was Netanyahu's place to make that tweet at all. It wasn't his place to come and say what the U.S. and the Mexican border, what should be done there, whether or not he personally agrees with it. It's not his spot to do it. It's not like he's mediating anything. Even if, yeah, he believes that it worked for us as a fence to stop terror attacks, but that's not the same situation back in the U.S., and it wasn't his place to say that.
Well, I was an Israeli soldier when they started building that wall during the Second Intifada. And I want to just very quickly tell the security story and the political story behind it, because I don't believe the wall is really very helpful. The political story is really that the Intifada destroyed the faith of most Israelis in a two-state solution and partitioning the land. We had been told up to that point that there's going to be peace if we just give Arafat the cradle of Jewish civilization. And what happened was the opposite. Now, most Israelis were not happy, and a member of Knesset at the time named Chaim Ramon from the Labour Party came up with this idea for a wall. And he brought this idea to the head of his party, a man who since passed away, Binyamin Ben Eliezer, a former general. And Ben Eliezer laughed at the wall. He laughed at this idea. Now, he went to Ariel Sharon, the head of the Likud party, the prime minister, also a former general. And Sharon also laughed at this idea of a wall. But then, when the 2003 elections occurred, the media had pushed this idea of a wall, and both the Labour and the Likud saw that there was a significant number of Israelis still undecided between Labour and Likud who support the idea of a wall. And both parties then adopted the policy, and we've been spending millions of shekels on it ever since. Now, security-wise, I would say that it wasn't the wall that stopped the Intifada, it was Operation Defensive Shield, which took place after the Park Hotel massacre in Netanya in Pesach of 2002. For the first time in almost 10 years, Israeli security forces were on the ground in Ramallah, in Tulkarem, in Hebron, in Jenin, and we were able to dismantle the terror infrastructure because we were there. But if you tell the Israeli public that they're safe and their children are safe because you have Israeli soldiers on the ground in the West Bank, you're not going to convince them to accept a two-state solution. But if you convince the Israeli public that they're safe and their kids are safe because we built this huge wall or fence and the bad guys are on the other side of that fence. The truth is I live on the other side. I'm on the east side of the wall personally. But if you tell the Israelis on the west side of the wall that we have this big wall and we're separate and that's why you're safe, they will likely support it because most people, unfortunately, today in the country support what will keep them safe above and beyond the deeper aspirations of their people. So I think my job, my unit in the army, had a very specific function. When the Shabak wanted a specific terrorist, my unit has to go get him. We didn't get him at the wall, we often got him in his house. I think the wall is really a PR nightmare for the country. I'm sure people working on campus can attest to that, whether you want to call it a wall or a fence, it's a PR nightmare. And I don't think it really does anything positive for the country or for our security.
Do you think a big war in Israel is inevitable, or do you think any peace would work?
I think we can have peace if we change the way we think. That means, I said before, the three barriers to peace right now: any talk over a two-state solution, the fact that both sides feel so threatened by the story of the other and are afraid to engage the story of the other without feeling their own story threatened, and number three, the insistence of Israel's ruling class to be part of the West and not the Middle East, combined with the insistence of our neighbors to see us as part of the West and not the Middle East. If we can change those things, if we can smash those obstacles, I believe peace is very attainable.
So I believe that peace is 100% possible. It's something, it should be our main goal right now, is to have peace with our neighbors and peace with everyone around us in the world. But we need the first step. The first step is mutual cooperation. We are trying to fix ourselves, and we should keep on trying to fix ourselves as much as possible. But right now, it doesn't sound like our neighbors are trying to fix themselves as much as we are. They should definitely first show the first steps into fixing themselves and working towards peace. Because as long as if one side is working towards peace and the other side isn't going to give as much as an effort, because of course, there are some Palestinians or some other of our Arab neighbors who do want peace. There are some. Not everyone is bad. Not everyone's a terrorist. But as long as they're not giving enough effort like we are, and we could also give some more effort. Like I said before, every country has its flaws. So as long as there isn't mutual effort, then peace will just be long down the road.
Since a bunch of you look bored, so I'll make it simple and I'll make it quick. So I have Palestinian friends that I sit in class with. Palestinian friends who come into school with hats that say Free Gaza, Free Palestine. They know I'm Israeli. They have no problem with it. We sit down, we talk, we go out sometimes, we eat hummus, we whatever. It's all fine. I go to visit my dad sometimes in Israel. My dad, if you saw him, you wouldn't think he was Jewish. He looks like he's Arab. And he has friends that are Arab. We're fine. If both governments came together and the both governments decided, okay, you know what, let's start literally working towards peace, let's start actually doing something, we might have a possibility at peace. If the governments continue how they are, where they're more focused on dealing with a bunch of other things and actually working towards peace for the greater good of the people, then we're going to have war, because war is always inevitable when it comes to a conflict that's rooted in religion. So I think if we go back to the main, realizing our similarities rather than our differences and really building it from there, then we might have a shot at peace. But I think that's a long shot, and hopefully war isn't anytime soon, but peace is definitely not that close either.
So there's a quote by Lester B. Pearson, and he says that ignorance breeds hatred. So if you're ignorant of another culture, if you don't know a lot about it, you'll eventually be scared of it, and you'll eventually hate it. That's just then how it works. So I think that the main problem with Israelis and Palestinians is that they're intimidated by each other. We don't know the other story, and if we learn the other story, it makes sense. To both sides. So I think that the reason that there is not peace right now is just a lack of education, and I think that if both sides would sit there and just be tolerant of the other story, there will be peace.
All right, let's all give a round of applause for our excellent panel. Now, I would like to close this excellent event by thanking all of our distinguished speakers for attending, my fellow Commissioner Amanda Heskiel for helping me organize this, and I'd like to give a shout out to some of the most involved Israel activism students in this school that helped make this event possible. Ellie Feldman, Sharel Zaytouni, Max Shem Tov, Mikey Darwish. Thank you very much. Now, every year the Israel Activism Commission at Flatbush hosts this event to bring students together who are passionate about Israel and wish to continue advocating on its behalf. Within the next few years, many of us will move on to college campuses and must be prepared for the battle that is currently raging as a result of the many issues regarding the Arab-Israeli conflict, along with the rise of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel sentiment on college campuses throughout the nation. As Jewish Americans, it is our duty to defend Israel against those who attempt to demonize and delegitimize it. Luckily, we have many accomplished people already on the ground who are continually advocating for Israel, whether it be on college campuses or on a media talk show, and we are fortunate enough to have some of them speak to us today and share their perspectives on our current climate to help us prepare to become better Israel activists. Through observing and analyzing their perspectives, it is my best hope that we will continue to expand our knowledge of Israel advocacy and continue to come to Israel's defense wherever and whenever we are called to do so. Thank you very much.
Hi. I just wanted to say that anybody planning to be in Israel next year, I wanted to offer the opportunity to get involved with the Atid program of the Levi movement, which focuses on this decolonization of Jewish identity, figuring out where we are in history and how we can be characters in the story of our people. I have a few flyers here if anybody's interested.
Same thing for Brooklyn College. If any of you are planning next semester to be in Brooklyn College, I'm on the board for the Bulldogs for Israel Club. We run a lot of events. We are the pro-Israel group on campus. So if any of you want to get involved later on, you could speak to me. Also, I can give you my contact information if you want. And next semester, you could continue your advocacy.
I'm graduating, so don't reach out to me.
I just want to say thank you so much, guys.